if you meet people's expectations, they say nothing, right?
Yes.
And people have high expectations today. So if you meet their expectations, they're satisfied. They won't blast you on social media or in reviews, but they're also not going to say anything.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a great day. You are listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh. Today's episode, we're going to talk about the self-employed life. And I'm super excited because, hey, I'm self-employed. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, dive deep into it. For those of you who don't know, this is your first time listening to this show, or you just kind of stumbled upon this, or one of your really awesomest friends recommended this show to you. This is the Service Business Mastery Podcast. It's a podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. My goal with this podcast is to help answer the unasked questions, or maybe you just you have a service business that you've had for several years. Maybe you inherited it, and you just have some burning questions that you want answered. My whole goal is to help answer those questions. With that being said, today we have Jeffrey Shaw coming on the show, and I'm super excited to talk to Jeffrey today. Fellow podcast host. He has the Self-Employed Life podcast. Check it out if you haven't. If you don't know of it already, check it out. And then also has a book coming out. And so, you know, modest Jeffrey, he's not going to talk about that too much, but I'm going to definitely pull it out of him. I want you to go get his book. It's on pre-order. By the time you listen to this, if you're listening to it live, then it's going to be ready for you to pre-order, and you need to pick it up. But with that being said, Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tersh, glad to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what makes Mr. Jeffrey tick.
Yeah. So I'll start from current and kind of move backwards. So
Okay.
today I am a small business consultant, specifically focusing on helping small business and self-employed business owners to develop themselves personally, to work with personal development as well as really innovative business strategies so that they can have the success in life they want. My background, I've been a portrait photographer for very affluent families for 36 years now. I do far less of it now, very little photography, but it was my mainstay, my main income for 25 years until I kind of started switching to coaching, consulting, speaking, et cetera. So your show is so meaningful to me because I've always been in service-oriented businesses, and I would say 95% of the businesses that I coach today are service-oriented businesses as well as I define service. I work with some companies that develop products, but they tend to be in a very that's an important component, I think, of being self-employed.
Yeah,
we are in service-oriented business, relation-based businesses, and that makes the experience different than what we see often from other brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And and the fact that you are the life of that business, people, what's the best way to say this? People can assume that it's a product-based business. Your product is your commodity, whereas in reality, it's the relationship you have. So we know that we provide an above average air conditioning service, and to someone who isn't used to dealing with service industries, they may just say, well, all air conditioning companies are the same. Who's the quickest one that can get out here? Or, all of them that have 4-star or higher reviews on Google, they're all the same. And so it is wildly different. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say about just the life in general of being self-employed.
Yeah, you raised actually a really good point, and it hadn't really occurred to me how quickly I identified my business experience as a photographer. I said, it's a service-oriented business. The fact of the matter is it's a product, right? But that's, in fact, what made me different than all the other photographers is that I actually forgot it was a product. Right?
Yeah.
I always said I was selling the intangible. The result was photographs, and in my case, they're very large portraits to hang on the wall, major art pieces to hang in a room. So, the product was a significant result, but I succeeded because it was never the product I was selling, really. And To be honest with you, Tersh, it was even more than the service. It was something I often say in my keynotes is that serving your clients is giving them what they've asked for. A deeper level of service is, as to use a photography reference, is seeing people. And often as an expert, what that means is that, particularly, your AC business, any of those businesses, that it's knowing what people need that they don't know to ask for.
Yes.
Right. That's the difference. It's like, if I have a problem with my AC or something, it's like, I think I know, oh, I must need a new filter. I must need this.
Right.
Like, guess what, dude? You have no idea what you're talking about. You're not the expert in it. Right. So an expert shows up not to just serve their clients and give them what they asked for, to look for what they don't know to ask for. And that's what separates you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. And it's so true because to get for me, I feel like the 5-star rating is overrated. Or it's overused, probably is a better way of saying it, because what you were saying about uh so they requested a portrait, a family portrait, and you could have just taken them and just sat them down on the couch, took their picture, basically what I would do with my iPhone, and here's your family portrait. But that's not what you did. You provided an experience with them, and you make that moment. And that's the same with air conditioning. Like, it's the full experience there, and that's what deserves 5 stars. If you just go there and fix the air conditioning unit, if you just go there and take a photo of the family, if you just go there and do the bare minimum, then that's honestly like a 3-star service, because that's the satisfactory level. To get to a 5-star, you should really be doing fanatic work.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the fact matter is that, if you meet people's expectations, they say nothing. Right.
yes.
And people have high expectations today. So if you meet their expectations, they're satisfied. They won't blast you on social media or in reviews, but they're also not going to say anything. But we know how quickly people will respond if they're dissatisfied.
Yes.
Right. But I would even challenge, I lately these days, I'm challenging the notion of experience a lot.
Okay.
Because first of all, I think to really win over your clients today, it is to make them feel like you get them, like you get their lifestyle, what makes them tick, their emotions, right? What I often say is that the goal in marketing today is to get your customers to say, wow, it's like you're in my head, right? Because that's a home run.
Yeah.
So the notion of experience can be confusing because, one person's experience is another person's nightmare.
That's true.
I went to a resort not too long ago, and it was, it was a high-end resort in Hawaii and all that nice stuff. And a travel agent picked it. And I actually hated the experience because I don't like people to dote on me. I don't like the fact that every time I got up to jump in the pool, they straightened out my towel. Like, I felt invaded. Like, I just wanted to jump in the pool, come back, and my towel was all crumpled up where I left it. Right? I don't want it fixed every time. I don't want my drink because I felt like there was these mysterious people coming out from behind the rocks and refilling my water and my iced tea. And I actually don't like that. So one person's experience is another person's nightmare. And so who are we as a brand and or a business to decide the experience that people want to have? What I suggest, what I think is more important, is to really understand what people value, what's important to them. And if you're dealing with if you're in a service-oriented business and you're in some way involved in people's homes, be it their AC, be it their plumbing, anything like that's that's the biggest investment in their life. Right. I spoke a while back I consulted with a company that did pest control and worked with their rebranding. And, they were just like every other pest control company when they were talking about pests, killing bugs. What separated them, what we did was to separate by tapping into the emotions of what it feels like to protect your most important asset. Right. So that's how you separate yourself from the competition. And we all have competition no matter what industry you're in.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Right. But, as a homeowner, it rarely means I don't care about how you kill the bugs. Right. What I care about is likely that you understand that it's bigger than that. It's about protecting my biggest asset. It's about doing it in a way that, because I know anytime I've ever had pest control have to come into my house, I've always had to ask, is it safe for my dog?
Yes.
So I wonder, why doesn't a control company just tell me that up front? Because if they tell me that and their 10 competitors don't, I'm going to choose them, right? If I know that up front on their website, because that's a
Mhm.
big concern. If you're going to be spraying the foundation of my house or the interior walls, I want to know that my dog is safe because he's going to lick everything.
Right, right, right.
Right. So that's, that to me is what it means to do more than serve, but to serve at a deeper level.
So what I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is tapping into emotion, figuring
100%.
out their emotion and the emotion behind uh, the reason they called you or reached out to you.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, I actually refer to it as emotional triggers, right? Um, my previous book was called Lingo,
Mhm.
and Lingo was a brand marketing strategy, brand messaging strategy. And it was to understand somebody's lingo is to understand them at such a deep level that it's almost like you're speaking to their hidden emotions,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Because lingo is not a jargon, right? Jargon is like an industry jargon. But lingo is that really tapping into unspoken emotions. So that's that's how you stand out, right? And the reason this is so important, particularly for self-employed businesses, is that we are tend to be, especially if it's a service-oriented self-employed business. I mean, you're entirely relation based,
Yeah.
right? And I'll give you a classic example we see all the time in businesses where businesses that offer deals to new customers only. Honestly, in a relationship business, that's one of the worst things you can do.
Yeah. I've always said that. I'm
It's
like,
a whole
man, what about
yeah.
the guy that's been here religiously, has always been here and done things, supported your small business
Yep,
from the get-go.
100%. I mean, do we understand why? Yeah, but it never
Yeah.
sits well with an existing customer. I actually, in my book, I talk about there's a whole chapter on loyalty and retention and how to increase that. And one of the things every business, particularly a service-oriented business, should always have some kind of a loyalty program built in, some benefit for being a customer. Hopefully more than just a punch card, 5 coffees, you get one free. Like
Yeah.
hopefully something more substantial than that. But to always figure something that they find out about only after they become a customer.
Can
Like,
you
so it's
give
not
like an
even used
example of
to
something like that?
yeah, so I mean, I'll use my my photography business as an example.
Okay.
And again, the key is that this is not a marketing ploy to get the customers. It's when you get them, how do you keep
After the
them?
fact. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And in a service-oriented business, you want to be the go-to person always. So what we did in my photography business, we introduced what was called a priority client prepay offer. Now, it addressed a very specific need at the peak years of my photography business, which was I had an 8-week waiting list,
Mm.
which sounds great. The problem is it was all the clients that hired me in my early years, the people that
Yes.
stood behind me when I had no name. They were used to getting a photo shoot in a week or two, and now
Mhm.
they're calling my staff. So they're not even getting through to me immediately. They're now getting staff, and the staff is telling them 8 weeks. That's not going to sit well.
Mm-mm.
And nor should it, because they're the ones that built up my business in the first
Yes.
place. So what we did is we introduced this priority client prepay offer, where we offered clients to prepay in February for a session that they wanted to do anytime in the future. Now, most people thought a year ahead, but it could be 5 years in advance because they know their
Oh wow.
child's going to graduate from high school, whatever. Because it was a deposit, it wasn't contingent to changing prices. So they would pay a deposit, which
Oh,
was
okay. So it didn't lock them into that price.
no, no.
Okay.
So it was purely a deposit. So they paid they paid money up front.
Yeah.
It saved them a little. We gave them a little. We credited their account. It wasn't a discount. It was minded. It was more because it was high end.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was more upgrade minded. Like
Yeah.
so they paid a deposit. We added 20%
Yeah.
to their
Yeah.
account
Mhm.
to be used anytime in the future. Right. But the big key was, and it wasn't about the savings of money, truly. The big driver was the reason we did it in February is because that was the slow season. We told them we would be in touch with them. We would ask them, when did you want to do your photo shoot? And we would be in touch with them 3 months before their desired photo shoot time so that they had priority scheduling before our typical curve
Yeah.
of the 8-week waiting list.
And you could
And
also
that
you could plan out you could budget your schedule
So
accordingly
here,
also.
now all these years later, that's the only way. I don't take on new clients. I
Yeah.
only work with people that let me know in February that they want to do a shoot that year so I can plan my life accordingly. The cool thing is that, as a photographer, I photographed entirely on location in the Northeast. There's no photography January through April because the weather's horrible in the Northeast,
Good point. Good
right?
point.
So February is just all cash flow. These are just clients. It was just a huge cash cow. So it turned out to be a huge win for my business as well. But that was a major emotional hook for people, right?
Yeah.
It
And
really
just
made them
how do
feel
you
special.
figure out that hook though? I mean, because I mean, I've pondered and we do some things, like that also. But I'm just wondering, like, if you're listening to this episode, like, and you're in a completely different industry,
Yeah.
and you're like, man, like
Well,
what?
I tell you, where I got the idea for this was from Starbucks.
Okay.
Honestly. So when Starbucks, just going back years ago, but when Starbucks first introduced their own, credit card, if you will, like remember
Yeah.
you would go put money on it. Now, this is going back probably the early 2000s or, when they came up with this idea. And I was fascinated by it. So the idea was they introduced this card that you could back in the day, people weren't giving it as a gift as much. They were usually using it for themselves. So imagine, just due to the psychology of it, people were putting $50, $100 on a card to buy their future coffee.
Yeah.
Right. There was no discount benefit to that, by the way.
I remember
So
that.
right.
And I remember now thinking that I'm like, I mean, there wasn't a discount for it.
No,
It was
no
just
discount. It's a phenomenal thing when you think about, like, not only did Starbucks get us to rethink paying $3 or $4 for a cup of coffee, now
Right.
let's pay for it $100 in advance before you even drank it.
Yeah.
What's the psychology behind that? One is that it had a cool factor, right? So somehow you felt like you're part of a club of a brand that you liked.
Yeah.
So that's something any brand can think about. Like, how do you make your customers? That's why we called it the priority client prepay offer, right? We created a club amongst our most highest valued clients. Any business can do that. It had a convenience factor to it because you didn't worry, but you'd have to worry about whether you had cash with you. So again, convenience factor. By paying ahead of time, they didn't have to worry about the scheduling. They were handing me over control, which they love, right? So there's just it's the underlying psychology that can be adapted to the business. I also will add to it that another way that any business and any industry can really level up and making their clients feel special is remember the details. So I'll give you an example. This worked in my photography business, but I also worked with a hair salon, and we told them to do the same thing. And you can systematize this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a business where people tend to cancel appointments, find out why they're canceling, right? They'll probably say something like, I'm really sorry I have to change my haircut appointment because my son's soccer team made it to nationals or something.
Right. Yeah.
Mark that down. The next time that person rebooks, when they call to rebook, or with this hair salon, what I loved is that it was put into a system. So the hairstylist always checked that system. So when, let's say in this case, the woman sat down in the chair, the hairstylist, who wasn't the person on the phone, said, by the way, how did your son's soccer game go?
Yes.
That's mind-blowing service, right? Because they're wondering, how did you even know that?
Yep.
Right? All it took was the person on the front line taking the calls to make a note, the stylist having a pattern of just checking the client's notes. Boom.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. But what a mind-blowing experience it is for somebody to have an experience with a business, a service-oriented business that knows those details.
Yeah, it's so it's funny you mentioned that, because part of our process is to gather that incognito information constantly. All, like, each person who touches you as a client, they are required to get as much information as possible without it being sound like a creeper. One of the questions that is supposed to be asked whenever you make the phone call to make the appointment is some kind of way in the conversation ask, if there's, and I'm paraphrasing this because I'm not the person who does this every day, so they do it a lot more gracefully than I do, but just what's something that is under $20 that you just couldn't live without? Like, what's the first thing that come to mind? And they snicker and say like a taco, or what's your favorite thing to have under $20? And they say like a candy bar. And 3 or 4 visits later, one of our service experts will show up
That's
with
awesome.
that candy bar, like that, whatever brand the candy bar that is. And same with pets names. So pets names are always marked in our system so that every single time a service tech goes out there, a service expert goes out to the house, we know the pets names, we know how many pets they have, children's name, favorite sports teams. And so it's just something that's just in our culture that we constantly
It's
are
fantastic.
gathering that information.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think I learned from giftology, maybe
Yeah. John
back in,
Rowland.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
it's just one of those things that's just built into our culture in general.
Yeah, and I think things like that are even more important today because of health concerns, right? So when I was working with a pest control company, we were rebranding due to what needed to be reconsidered after the COVID. And if they're entering people's homes, we suggested to find not only let people know your protocol, your safety
Mhm.
protocol, but find out, is there anybody in the house of higher risk? And how are you going to navigate that? Is there a grandmother? Is there an elderly person living in the house? So that you can minimize their risk. And it's just really
That's awesome.
important to show up with that level of sensitivity today, and um, and know that this is an area where your client base overall is going to be so split. You're going to have some people, like I happen to be, one of those people that is extremely cautious.
Mhm.
And quite honestly, Tersh, I'm otherwise healthy. I don't worry about dying from it, but I'm really busy. I can't afford the 3 weeks of
Right.
being sick.
Yes.
I just look at it that way. It's like, I'm pretty sure I'll survive the illness, although I don't want to take that for granted. But I got a book coming out. Like, I can't afford the time off. Like, so stay away and keep me safe, right? Because I'm all about being productive. And that is one of the factors of being self-employed, right? What
Yes.
happens if you're self-employed, even if you have a staff, it's the effect on your business if you're out of commission for a
Yeah.
few weeks, which is why part of my work in um, is around self-care. I mean, that's part of the messaging behind my work as well, is how are you taking care of yourself to maximize your productivity,
Mm,
as well as how are you taking care of yourself, because without you, there's a really good chance that your business can't survive, not in the long term.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can put the policies and procedures in place, but when the cat's away, the mice will play.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
as
Yeah. And
much
I
as
said and it's such a dichotomy. When on one hand, and as an author and the work that I do, it's a bit of a paradox, because on one hand, I feel like I'm often encouraging people to scale their business in a ways that they don't feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders. Because
right.
if that's the case, then you're limited by how much weight you can carry, right?
Hmm.
So there's that. What can you do but there's also the harsh reality that it is a self-employed business, and
Yes.
you are the face of that business, you are the leader of that business, and without you, there's going to be a huge effect. So it's important, like I said, I think empathy is sort of the word in business today, that the more we can expand our empathy and understanding that people are in different places for their
Yeah.
own reasons. We need to, stop the fighting and thinking that everybody should be alike. The reality is, you don't know who you're encountering that has a genuine risk,
Yes.
and how they
Yeah.
need to take care of themselves. Or I have a friend who has a son who's significantly at risk for other health reasons,
Mm,
and so it's the role of the whole family to keep him safe, because it would
yeah.
definitely put his life at risk. So
And you have to think about this also, and not to go off on a tangent just about this pandemic in general, but just that family member, not the one that is super health adverse, can actually get sick, but the other family member, they can't come in contact with anybody either, and they can't
right.
come in contact with somebody who's come in contact with somebody, and it is a domino effect that you have to be very, very cautious of. And like our service experts, we have a couple of them that are more on the commercial side, and they're used to like being on the rooftops and stuff like that. And so whenever they get in a residential situation, early on, they were like, well, they didn't ask me to put a mask on. I was like, I don't care if they ask if you to put a mask on. Our policy is that we are masked, we're gloved, and we have
Yeah.
shoe covers on, and they're
Yeah.
disposed after each call properly. And, that's our protocol, and that's what we share with everyone. So that's why they could call and trust us. They don't have to ask you to put anything on. It's we ask you to put it on. And so it's that wrapping your head around that mindset of, just like you said, I mean, exactly like you said, it doesn't matter if they think differently than you think or we think. It's just having empathy for everyone in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, I've been in business long enough to have lived through a few crises, 9/11, and I was living in New York at the time.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and my clientele were primarily Wall Streeters, so that was, a really significant, event.
Yeah.
And, then of course there was the Great Recession. So I always feel like, this is kind of like my third rodeo with dealing. And the fact of the matter is, will by nowhere near be the last. In fact, I would expect disruptions to our lives and businesses to come along at a more rapid rate.
Mhm.
It's one thing to say, oh, every 10 years, something's going to come along. Whatever it is, whether
Yeah.
it's political unrest or economic unrest or a pandemic, when you're self-employed, that is, and honestly, Tersh, that's the foundation of the book and the foundation as to why I wrote it. Because for years, I have asked every self-employed person I've ever met, like, why are you self-employed? And everyone has some variation of the same answer, which is they wanted to gain control, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to control their destiny, their future. They wanted to control the hours they work. And to which I reply, and how's that going for you? And everybody laughs. I'm like, yeah, what a myth that turned out to be.
Right.
So, but what I've realized is, and I'm a guy that likes to systematize everything, as you could probably tell. But what I realized is that I had the answers. I had a lot of the answers to this because of my depth of experience. And what I know is that when you set up the right environment, what I refer to in the book as the self-employed ecosystem, and I look at it as an environment with three components, which are personal development, business strategies, and daily habits and mindsets. Okay, so these three components that make a thriving self-employed ecosystem. With the right guidance, which is what I offer and what this book does, is and what I do, for clients, on a one-to-one basis. The goal is, if you can set up that environment, you're giving yourself a 90% chance of it working.
Mm.
The problem in businesses, and the reason why it feels so out of control, is that if any one of those elements is off, it's affecting everything. And that's why I call it this ecosystem, because it's no different than nature, right? If one
Yeah.
element in a natural ecosystem is off, whether it's the introduction of bacteria, or here in Florida, and I live in Miami, and pythons
Pythons.
have invaded the Everglades, right?
Yep.
And it's a huge problem. Like
Mhm.
it that can dramatically affect the entire ecosystem of the Everglades.
Yep.
So it's because one element is off. And that is what we need to, that's how you gain control. So you can gain control by what you can control is the environment that you set up for your success. We actually can't control everything that's going to come along. But
Right.
you know what? If your business is set up well, as mine is, when something like a pandemic comes along, I look at it, and what I refer to in the book is the business model of multiples. It's a bunch of levers, right? Income streams, different levers. So when something comes along, you're in control to decide this lever is going to get yanked down. Like, as a professional speaker, that lever got yanked down so quick,
Yeah.
right? But fortunately, I have other levers, like
Mhm.
brand consulting and small business consulting. Everybody trying to figure out what's next, right? That it
Yep.
actually is a great environment for me to succeed. So what I do, I ramp up that lever. That's how you gain
I love that.
control. And
Yeah.
so my goal of this book, and in all the work that I do, is to help self-employed businesses gain as far more control than they have ever had or believe they can have, and also the strategies to manage what they can't control. And that's where daily habits and mindsets come in, because it's, I make a comparison in the book that sometimes, we when we're self-employed, we put everything on the line, and in the end, sometimes we feel like a shirt hanging on a clothesline being affected by the wind, right?
Yeah.
But you can gain far more control, and you have to learn how to deal with what you can't control, because it's going to come along, but you don't want it to derail you. That's where the goal is sustainable success. How can you even out the ups and downs, which are inherent?
Sweet. I'm taking notes like a madman. Uh, where can we pick up a copy of your book? And this episode it's being released March the 3rd. So if you're listening to this as soon as it's being released live on all your podcast catchers, it's going to be released on March 3rd. Today's March 3rd. As of right now, where do we go to pick up the book?
So it's kind of a cool double whammy. So the book is currently for pre-order, for paperback as well as ebook. The audio version will come out later. But by treating yourself to a copy of this book, I've also put together, which I'm really excited about the book, but I'm almost more excited about this. I've put together a 2-day online summit called Self-Employed Summit. And you know what, Tersh, I did this because it doesn't exist. When I started writing this book, I did my due diligence. I looked for what other books are out there for self-employed business owners. There aren't any. None that actually makes sense. The only books out there are things like, taxes when you're self-employed. I mean, who cares? It's not our biggest issue. It's an issue, but not the biggest issue. So I also realized there's just no events, right? So I pulled together this 2-day online event with 10 of my most awesome speaker friends that get paid tons of money normally, and they've willingly done this because they care about the mission. They care about the mission to help existing self-employed businesses. And the other thing, and this so fits into your show, we have the highest rate of unemployment since the Great Depression. With the highest rate of unemployment comes the highest rate of self-employment.
Yep.
There are masses of people trying to figure out how to get control of their life again because they lost their job. They have families to feed. They want to do something with their life. They're going to be turning to self-employment to the extent that predictions are by 2030, 50% of the US population will be self-employed.
Wow.
It's phenomenal. But, I mean, and not only, and I also think about the people in corporate that they may still have their job, but they're re-looking at their life and thinking, but I don't want this job. I want to do something more meaningful, because if you haven't learned that life is short in 2020, when are you going to learn it?
Exactly.
Right. So we have this mass exodus towards self-employment, and there's really no vehicles out there. And that's why I pulled together this summit. So with the pre-order of the book, that gets you direct access to this 2-day online education called Self-Employed Summit. The place to get the book, you can buy it from your typical online retailers, but I recommend going to the selfemployedlife.me. The reason being is that there are actually 9 online retailers where you can buy the book. And I did that very intentionally because I wrote a book for self-employed business owners. I didn't want all the money to just go to the big behemoth.
Yeah, right.
Right. So there are online retailers where when you purchase the book through a smaller online retailer, a portion of the proceeds go to independent bookstores.
Oh, cool.
Things like that. So I wanted to walk my talk. So the selfemployedlife.me is a great access for that. The other thing I think would be really sweet for your folks is I've actually put together a whole bundle of graphics from the book. I'm a big believer in visuals and how allowing them to support you. And they can grab that at selfemployedbundle.com. Okay. It's my gift to your listeners, selfemployedbundle.com. It's got marketing graphs, many of the things in the book. So it's a great companion to the book as well. It also stands on its own too. There's an explanation of what the different things mean.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's a good tool. It's a great tool for people.
I love it. That's awesome, man. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate everything that you've mentioned here, because there's been tons of golden nuggets that were just littered throughout that entire conversation. Where's the best place for them to learn more about you? Like, are you on one particular social media more than the other, or?
I'm pretty much on all of them, but honestly, if I am, as you can probably tell, a lot about relationship building, and relationships are best built when you get something from me first, which is why I suggest grab selfemployedbundle.com, because Perfect. Hey, I'm going to make sure that how else we can stay in touch if you choose to.
I love
it.
It.
So I'm on all the platforms. I'm active on all of them, even Clubhouse, which is the new rage. I'm kind of figure out what that's all about. It's actually kind of cool. It's kind of cool.
It is.
As a podcaster, I can get into it. We'll just see where it goes. There's also a lot of fighting, so we'll see where it goes.
And also, don't forget to check out your podcast, the Self-Employed Life podcast too.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's for yourself, all of us that are self-employed, It's a crazy life, and it can be a lonely one. I really don't think anybody can understand our existence who's not self-employed.
Yep.
I just, and I'm not saying having a corporate job is easy, although I don't think it's as challenging as being self-employed. I mean, I really don't. I'll be honest. Like, this is a tough road, and we need each other, and that's why I do the work that I do. It's like I want to be the hero for self-employed business owners, and that to my dying days, because it's all I've known. I've never received a paycheck ever. Like, since the age of 14, I've been finding my own way. I sold eggs door to door when I was 14 years old, and I've never stopped. So this is what I fight for. So I'm excited for your listeners, for sure.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Tersh. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And if anybody has any questions at all, don't forget selfemployedbundle.com. Definitely go check out there. The selfemployedlife.me. Pick up your copy of the book before it's released. And if you have any questions over and above any of that, feel free to reach out to me, tersh@serviceemperor.com. That's my personal email address that comes straight to my cell phone. You will get an autoresponder that tells you that I only check my email twice a day, but I will get back to you as soon as humanly possible. With that being said, thank you again, Jeffrey, for coming on the show. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Service Business Mastery Podcast, a podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. Have a wonderful week, and stay safe out there.